is September 24th, 2025, and Trump is either trolling the world or he has apparently done a major flip-flop just 8 months into his second term as he took to Truth Social on Tuesday to declare to everyone that he thinks that Ukraine can win this war and also win back all of its original territory, I guess going back to its borders in the 1990s. This after he previously insisted that Ukraine needed to essentially get over the territory that it had lost, including Crimea. So, what should we make of this statement, and what does it tell us about where tensions could be headed as we continue to watch NATO poke the bear while insisting that Russia is just a paper tiger? Well, we got into all of the latest with a special guest earlier, so let's take a listen to that conversation now. Joining me now to discuss is Larry Johnson, a former CIA analyst and national security expert. Larry, thanks so much for taking the time to join me.
I always appreciate the invite, Rachel.
It's always great to have you on the show. Now, I want to get your take on the latest here, as I know that Trump took to Truth Social on Tuesday, where he said, quote, after getting to know and fully understand the Ukraine-Russia military and economic situation, and after seeing the economic trouble it is causing Russia, I think Ukraine, with the support of the European Union, is in a position to fight and win all of Ukraine back in its original form. All right, will you start by giving me your reaction to this statement, as it seems like a massive flip-flop just 8 months into Trump's second term?
You know, we could turn this entire Trump presidency into like a Broadway show. So this one would be he'd come out singing "Getting to Know You," getting to know all about you. And we're going, wait, what have you been doing the last 6 months or 8 months? So I wrote a piece yesterday at Sonar 21. And I titled it "Donald Trump, Crazy Like a Fox or Just Plain Crazy?" Now, so based upon that initial truth, he calls his social posts on Truth Social truths. Based on that truth, you'd think he's just plain crazy. This is insane. But then when you sort of read through it a little closer, he's engaged with, I think, some massive trolling of NATO, trolling of Zelensky. Like you said, man, we'll sell you all the weapons you want, except NATO's going to have to buy them from us, and then they can give them to you. So that's not a change in policy. But the real tell came after that Truth Social came, or that truth came out. France, Germany, the United Kingdom, and Ukraine submitted a resolution to the UN Security Council that's basically saying Russia's really bad, and we all need to punish Russia for what she's done. And let's all agree that we're going to stop Russia. And the United States said, nope, we're not supporting that. And here's the three musketeers out of Europe with Zelensky going, wait a second, you just said all this stuff, and now you're not backing us. So I think Trump's playing a bit of a game here. He is trying to put out the face that, oh man, I'm with Ukraine 110%. But if it means I actually have to do something, no, forget about that. We're not going to do that. So it's basically putting the entire onus on the Europeans. And I imagine they're pretty frustrated today. But you're right. I mean, that when that came out, people were like going, using letters like WTF and,
Yeah, and it was interesting to see because, looking back at the statements we've heard from Trump up until this point, he hasn't really seemed to care about territory, right? He's, in fact, argued that Kiev needs to get over it when it comes to Crimea, right? That they need to accept that Crimea is lost to the Russians, admitting that it was peacefully returned to Russia back in 2014. And so it hasn't seemed as though Trump cares all that much about territory. But then when he's coming back with this version of, oh, yeah, we can restore Ukraine back to its original form, I look at that and I'm going, okay, is he just being a troll, or is he, listening to, Marco Rubio maybe John McCain is back and he's hearing all of their voices and going, oh, yeah, yeah, I think that Ukraine can win again. And yet, the European Union, I mean, Europe, these are supposed to be the United States' closest allies. And yet the US is over here like, oh, yeah, yeah, you guys, sure, you guys handle this proxy war against Russia. We're just going to sell you the weapons, knowing it stands to hurt Europe. But yet there doesn't seem to be anything that Europe is doing to push back here. How do you view that relationship?
Toxic. This if you've ever been in a relationship with someone who's a little bit psychotic, you understand what I got to get away from this person. They're not safe to be around. What's interesting in that truth that he put out, he was basically repeating the recent comments of General Keith Kellogg. Kellogg's two favorite things to say are, "Oh, look at how bad Russia's doing militarily. Oh my God, they're just inching along, and they've had 3.5 years. It just proves what a weak military they are." And my response to that is to say, well, okay, let's look at this. Russia's been fighting Ukraine, which has been backed by NATO, armed by NATO, funded by NATO, provided intelligence by NATO. They are, in fact, a de facto NATO force. And despite all of that NATO backing, Ukraine is losing territory, but more importantly, losing an incredible number of men. Since January of this year, Russia and Ukraine have been exchanging the bodies of dead soldiers from the other side. The ratio is for every dead Russian returned, the Russians returned 40 dead Ukrainians. Okay? So at that level, it just shows the disproportionate loss on the Ukrainian side. Now, the Keith Kellogg's will then come back and say, oh, wait a second. No. The reason that's happening is because the Russians are advancing so fast, Ukraine doesn't have time to recover the bodies. You go, wait a second. You said they were moving slow. Now you're saying they're moving fast? Which is it? Either they're moving so fast that you don't have time to recover the bodies that they're killing, or they're moving so slow. The other bugaboo that he laid out is, the Russian economy. And Trump repeated this. Russian economy is in trouble. They are on the verge of collapse. And you say, oh, really? Well, what are the markers? Well, this year their growth rate is at 1.8%. It's down from 4.4% last year, but that was because they had inflation that was double digit. And Maria Nabulina, the central banker, imposed measures to cool the economy off to reduce inflation. And now we get news today that the inflation rate is down around 8%. So, and with the economy projected to grow this year at 1.8, it will return next year. And its debt, Russia's debt to GDP ratio is 19%. So let's look at the United States. How's our economy? Well, we're in a period of stagflation. We've got our economic growth rate is 1.5% less than Russia's. Our inflation is actually ticking up higher than Russia's. And our debt to GDP ratio is like 126%. Now, if you flew in from another planet and you were given a choice that, hey, Rachel, which economy would you want to be in charge of? You'd be going, I go with the Russians. So that's how ridiculous this is. And yet these people like Kellogg and others around Trump genuinely believe that Russia's weak. And, you've been there. You've seen how the vast size of the country, the massive natural resources, the intelligence and work ethic of the people. All economies have ups and downs, but Russia's not, this is not a Soviet collective farm from the 1930s in the midst of some purge. This is a robust, healthy economy. And the Russians have learned, hey, we're not reliant upon the world. It's estimated about 25% of the Russian GDP is generated from exports. And the majority of those exports go to like 6 countries: China, Kazakhstan, India, Turkey. So, Russia's not dependent on exports to the United States, to Canada, or to Europe. That's sort of icing on the cake.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you bring that up because it is so interesting to me how the Trump administration keeps making these claims. And he goes on in that statement when he's talking about it and he's saying, and this was another interesting thing I thought that Trump mentioned. He goes, when the people living in Moscow and all of the great cities, towns, and districts all throughout Russia find out what is really going on with this war. So he's arguing that, oh, the people of Russia are completely in the dark, right? They don't have access to information. It's almost like he's kind of flipping Russia versus Ukraine. And he's like, oh, yeah, the people just don't know. When they find out the fact that it's almost impossible for them to get gasoline through the long lines that are being formed. I mean, we're talking about Russia, right? And its wealth of natural resources. Now, I have not, it's been a minute since I've been to Russia. I still have plenty of friends there. I have not heard any mention of long lines for gasoline or any sort of shortage of natural resources. When Trump makes a statement like that, I mean, do you think that he's saying that to like speak to the American audience because that's something that Americans would care about and would be very much concerned about, or is there more to it there?
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly it. He's trying to persuade, he's trying to use sort of tropes that resonate with the American people in order to convince the American people to continue to support this failed policy. Now, yeah, when I heard this report about the long gas lines thing's been out for about a month or two. And so I contacted a friend. He's actually a graduate of West Point. He was head of the Russian club at West Point. He served 20 years with the U.S. Army, but he's of Russian heritage. His grandparents moved to the United States at the start of the revolution in 1917, but he grew up here. He has now moved back to Russia. So I said, "Hey, what about this gas lines?" He goes, "I don't know." He said, "We don't own a car. We just, public transportation is so good, we don't need a car." He said, "I'll check." And he came back later and said, that's, he said, there were some gas lines in August. He says, that's the big vacation time when everybody's heading out of town. But that wasn't because of shortage. It's just because everybody and his brother decided, hey, we're gonna head for the dacha in the countryside. So yeah, this is just more Western propaganda.
Yeah, and it's interesting to me too to see, and I appreciate that explanation because I'm looking at this and I'm going, okay. And then the last thing I'll bring up about his statement is that interesting part of it here, and this could just be a war rallying cry for Europe that he's trying to put together, but he says that Ukraine would be able to take back their country in its original form, and who knows, maybe even go further than that. Putin and Russia are in big economic trouble, and this is the time for Ukraine to act. Yet, if we look at Russia, they're over here saying, hey, Ukraine is in such a dire position that it's not able to launch any kind of offensive operation. It's just trying to hold the front lines together and do what it can there. So I know it could just be trolling, but what do you make of a statement like that from Trump? And could we see any sort of action coming from Ukraine or Ukraine plus NATO when it comes to trying to target Russia?
Well, let's be clear. NATO already has been targeting Russia. The provision of both weapons and intelligence that's used to, convey geolocations. That's been used. It was no coincidence the other day that this P-8 Poseidon. So it's a aircraft. It's an intelligence collection aircraft that gets data. That data was passed to the Ukrainians, and they used it to launch a drone attack in Crimea. Robert Kagan, surprisingly, even admitted the other day that the actions of NATO countries, including that of the United States, have qualified them as co-belligerents in this, and that Russia would be fully entitled under international law to attack the European and the countries and the United States. But it hasn't. And I think part of that is both Putin and with his advisors like Lavrov and even Medvedev, they understand the cost, the true human cost that such a war would bring about, and are trying to avoid that at all costs on their side. But the Europeans, and particularly those Lilliputians up north, in Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, I mean, combine those three countries, take all of their population together, and I think that represents about the size of Brooklyn, New York. They're tiny, and yet they are nasty, vicious, and intent on provoking a war. And so the real risk, and I spoke with Alistair Crook yesterday, um, and Alistair agrees that what's going on in the Baltics right now, it's like standing in the middle of a shed filled with gasoline and fireworks and lighting matches. Something you're likely to get an explosion that you don't want, but when it comes, it's going to be awful.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm concerned about, watching this latest string of allegations. It seems like every few days we get a new claim that, oh, Russia has violated NATO airspace in one of these smaller countries, or you've got Russian drones in Poland, they say. And so when you see those claims, and then on top of that, when you see Trump saying, oh, yeah, they should be able to shoot down Russian aircraft that they accuse of violating their airspace, what kind of concerns does that raise to you about what NATO could be trying to cook up when it comes to a possible false flag to exactly ignite that match and set off all of these different fireworks and see a much wider war?
The danger is some of these military guys, and we've seen it with the retired ones, General Keane, General Petraeus, General Ben Hodges, General Mark Kimmett, the whole list of clowns, that they really believe that Russia's weak, that Russia is militarily incompetent. As I've pointed out before, to say, okay, so Russia has fought against a NATO force and is making advances after 3.5 years. The United States fought in Afghanistan for 21 years against a bunch of goat herders wearing sandals and wool blankets. They didn't have artillery. They didn't have tanks. They didn't have overhead intelligence. They didn't have satellites. They didn't have a massive intelligence service. All they had were rifles, pistols, some machine guns, some mortars, some RPGs. And they kicked our ass. Okay? So who are these guys to even be in a position to judge what Russia's capabilities are, when the fact of the matter is that the United States has not won a war against a foreign adversary since the end of World War II. We fought to a draw with the Chinese in Korea. We lost to the Vietnamese in Vietnam. Oh, okay. Yeah, we beat up on the Grenadians. They didn't even have an army. So that's our new method of operation. We're going to pick fights with countries that don't have armies or air force or navies, and man, we'll win those. Yeah, that really speaks well of your mighty military. The United States is living in a complete delusion, and again, the danger here is they'll try something like that, and then Russia will turn around and start shooting down our planes that are flying on really the edge of their airspace, and then it's going to get hot. And Russia is prepared to. Russia has a number of options for escalation that fall very far short of nuclear weapons, particularly with the Reshnik missile. That is an intermediate range ballistic missile that could take out every target in Europe. Uh, so Russia doesn't want to go that way, but I fear that the West is going to push them into that corner.
Yeah, that is a major concern, especially as I know that we are just months away from the New START treaty expiring. You've got Putin this week here saying, hey, I'm offering you a 1 year extension. Let's have talks. I don't want to escalate. Yet the US is in this position where I'm looking at the Trump administration. I'm going, I don't know if they're smart enough to take the olive branch that is being offered to them and to try to avoid this. When it comes to the concerns about nuclear escalation, how do you see that right now? I mean, I would like to think that, the guys at the very top would be smart enough to avoid that, but there's sometimes I look at them and I go, I don't know if they really are, because they just keep pushing tensions further and further.
Yeah, it's like um, someone. The West has a gap for its escalation. It's either got to use, a fly swatter to kill the fly or an RPG, a rocket propelled grenade. They don't have like anything in between, no bug spray or fly strips. Whereas Russia does. And as you look back over the last 25 years, it's been the United States, not Russia, that's been walking away from agreements to try to control, moderate. When George W. Bush blew up the anti-ballistic missile treaty agreement, the reason that agreement was put in place was to avoid countries building air defense systems capable of taking out intercontinental ballistic missiles. Because if a country did that, then that country could think, we've got the ability to launch a strike and the ability to defeat any retaliation, which then really raises the risk that those weapons could be used in certain conditions. Well, the United States walked away from that, and then Russia said, okay. So Russia now is actually in a position where it has built air defense systems that are capable of defeating U.S. intercontinental ballistic missiles or submarine launched ballistic missiles or air launched. But Russia's not taking that to the point of trying to coerce or threaten or blackmail the West. The West is in a desperate situation technologically. Russia already has 3 different versions of hypersonic missiles. Those are missiles that travel at speeds in excess of Mach 6 and can be maneuvered, steer. The United States still doesn't have one. And I know one of the individuals that's involved in the management of that program. 2 years ago, he was saying, yep, we're going to have it by December. That was 2 years ago. And I swear to God, just yesterday, he goes, yeah, we'll have it in November. I just said,
oh, no.
I ain't holding my breath for that, buddy. The disparity actually in weapons favors the Russians, disfavors the United States, but the United States is pretending that it's just the opposite. That, we're the most powerful, we're the bravest, we're the strongest, and the Russians are the weakest. And nothing could be further from the truth.
Yeah, it's incredibly frustrating as you're watching the US in this position where they've got this proxy war against Russia. And sure, they want to act like, oh, we're handing this off to Europe, but it is still ongoing. The US is still very much involved in making it possible. Then we've got the US over here, plotting for the next phase of war against Iran with Israel. Oh, and then we have the US in a position where eventually they want war with China, yet it doesn't seem like the US is doing anything to really prepare. Like, we do not seem remotely prepared for all of these different conflicts that the US is pursuing around the world. The last thing I wanted to bring up when it comes to military readiness and just this position that the US is in, where yes, we have been the top dog, but that is not always going to be the case, and the US seems to be running out of room here. So how do you view this, this approach to military conquest around the world when the US simply is not prepared for it?
Yeah, there really is a disconnect there. We have 2 examples in the last 3 years, or based upon the last 3 years, of the limitations and weaknesses of the U.S. military. Number one, our ability to supply artillery shells, air defense systems, air defense missiles from Patriot batteries, from terminal high altitude area defense systems, the THAADs, is extremely limited. The war in Ukraine has exposed that the United States does not have an industrial depth to produce in volume the amount of weapons that are needed to fight in this kind of modern war. So that's exposed a tremendous weakness on the part of the United States. And it's not just in one area, it's across the board. Secondly, Trump deployed an aircraft carrier task force to the Red Sea to stop the Houthis. And how'd that work out? After 7 weeks, we were forced to declare victory. We win. They capitulate. and the Yemenis are going, capitulate? Did you capitulate? How about you? Did you capitulate? I didn't capitulate. And the United States basically turned tail and runs out. So now what are we doing? The real flashpoint, I think the most dangerous one right now, is the incredible military buildup off the coast of Venezuela in the Caribbean. I think the Trump administration is going to attempt a regime change in Venezuela. I think they've been told how easy it would be, that they'll be able to easily take out Maduro and take control of the country. And I think that's going to backfire badly on them. Then it's going to expose once again the limitations of U.S. military power. I can't emphasize enough. Yeah, we look incredibly tough when we're beating up on smaller countries that don't have the kind of military capabilities that we have. And yet, even then, when we had the decided advantage in Afghanistan, we couldn't beat the Taliban. So I think it's incumbent upon all Americans to step back, take a look in the mirror, and stop believing all this cheerleading nonsense that's designed to enrich the military industrial complex and the members of Congress who get political donations from those industries, and to get the United States back to something that was envisioned by George Washington, where we'd leave others the hell alone, take care of ourselves, and mind our own damn business.
Yeah, that sounds like a logical approach, and yet so many in Washington, they campaign on that, and then they get into office, and all of a sudden they all turn into John McCain, and you have Trump talking about, oh, we're gonna get Bagram Air Base back, and I'm just like, all right, he's lost the plot with that plus Venezuela. I'm like, okay, these guys, they, and it only took them 8 months, but yet that is the position that we find ourselves in. I know that there is a lot at stake here all around, and I really appreciate you taking the time to join me today to break down all of the latest here. Larry Johnson, a former CIA analyst and national security expert, thank you so much for your time and insight.
Thank you, Rachel. Have a great day.
If anything in this video resonated with you, be sure to like it, share it with your friends, leave a comment, and as always, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to keep up with all of my work, make sure that you're subscribed to my page on Substack. That's rachelblevins.substack.com. That's where you'll find ad-free videos and new weekly episodes of my exclusive series for paid subscribers called Sanctioned. You can also check out Sanctioned over on my page on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Rachel Blevins. As always, thank y'all so much for all of your support, and I'll see you next time.